Jorge Masvidal touched on his boxing match with Nate Diaz, and it was a little bit of revisionist history, but I appreciated it for two reasons. First off, and what do you call that, by the way? What do you call that? It's not celebrity boxing, it's not influencer boxing. Like, those are two very legitimate fighters who had a very legitimate grudge, unfinished business from a sold-out Madison Square Garden. Like, that was very real in the spirit of competition, but it still goes into a certain category. Whatever that category of having famous and well-known people out there boxing, whatever that is, this was easily the best ever. Best ever for this was more entertaining and more was shown even than Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. was awesome. I got to give that to Masvidal. I mean, Masvidal's tired 5 rounds in and has found himself in a fight way harder than he thought it was going to be, and he found a way. And he did all of this in a southpaw stance, which I wish he would have touched on. When Masvidal went out there in a southpaw stance, the announcers were even talking about that he would change. O'Malley was even saying he's going to throw him off, and then he's going to change. And O'Malley himself does that. We all thought it, but he didn't. He stayed there. He was digging to the body from his opposite side. I assume because he was hurt. There was no other reasonable assumption to come to for why Masvidal would have fought southpaw when he's orthodox, particularly in such a big moment, and after he feels him out and everything and realizes this isn't my best stance, but he stayed there. So I'm just offering for you, like, I appreciated that George touched on this because I've never quite put paid to that. I've always felt like we were owed a little bit more. But where this organization went, and in light of the lawsuits, when it started to become very clear that there's not going to be another event, all the media was gone. So Masvidal said first off that he won that fight. He said that he got robbed. Now, that is not what I saw at all. But I had 3 other people in the room with me. I had Cowboy, I had Joel, and I had my hot-ass wife, and my wife thought Nate's got a problem. I think he won, but he's got a problem. But the other 2, Cowboy and Joel, thought that George beat him. So it's simply not what I saw. But, right? So, for Masvidal saying that he got robbed, I like that. I like that piece of revisionist history. He even spoke on why. He went into some details about the judges, some things that he overcame and had the courage to push through, but now in hindsight, he can see that he got set up. It was interesting. It was compelling. They're all the things that you would do when you're attempting to get a rematch against Nate Diaz, who, by the way, also wants to and is the more likely of the two to return to the UFC. But that's not the direction he went, which I thought added to the sincerity. I thought that added, like, whether you agree with what George is saying or not, the first thing that we need to do as an audience, the second thing we need to do, first thing is to hear him, but then the very next thing that we need to do is to try to determine, is he performing or is he testifying, right? A performance doesn't have to be true. Testimony, you're under oath. And I thought George was being very sincere. That he thinks that outcome was wrong and that he thinks that he won that match. And that, to me, is interesting. I wish he would have elaborated. I wish he would have gone from there, because there were so many things to be proud of if you were Jorge Masvidal. I mean, his ability, and that he pushed for 5 rounds, that he never stopped trying to win that fight. He never wilted. I believe he had an injury, and my evidence of that is he was in southpaw. He has never made that excuse. He's never said it. There's a lot of courage that was shown by Masvidal, but Masvidal also says, what was I in there boxing for in the first place? I'm an MMA fighter. And when I talk about revisionist history, when Masvidal retired from MMA, he quickly let it be known he was not retiring from competing. He was going to go over to boxing because that's what he is, after all. He's a boxer. So he's kind of floating that around. And there was no mention of any type of a rematch or another match with Nate. And that is also a fascinating thing to make sure that you study. Nate Diaz has come out and he has sued the promotion. for breach. They did not pay him his money. To my understanding, I think I'm right on this. We'll be real close on the numbers, and my points there 100%. Nate was promised $10 million. Nate received $1 million. So they asked George, right in the same interview, they asked Masvidal, were you paid? He said, I got to plead the fifth, which could not be a nicer way of saying, no, I wasn't paid. But he said, I got to plead the fifth on this while lobbying to get himself another fight. And people, including really smart ones, get taken advantage of, particularly in this industry. This is the only sport in any free capitalistic democracy that is regulated by the government, quite literally. The only time government oversees sport is in communist regimes, with one exception, and that is combat. And that's here, if you trace that back to the 60s, all of the things that happened, that's here because of corruption, where even the government got involved and said, hey, this is a very pure and a very true thing, and we're going to support it. We've got Olympic athletes and other reasons to keep this preserved. But you're done with corruption, and you're done ripping these guys off, and we're going to see to it. So I share that because even a smart guy can get taken advantage of, and in any industry, those deals that you make, those words, I know people that I got it in writing. I know people that believe they have something because they have it in writing. Like, I know these kind of people, and I have no idea why they believe that. I mean, I have no idea whether it's written down or it's verbal or it's a handshake or it's an understanding. I have no idea why they think that that's a guy that's going to lie to you, right? The contract or the verbal statement is only as good as the guy that makes it. There's other things that you have to do. And I offered you what I just offered you because I'm not happy that this happened. And I'm also not calling them and or their management team like as though they hadn't done some due diligence. There's just certain litmus tests that you would check into. And the first thing you want to know if a guy's claiming he's got money, first off, if he will show you the money. Second off, if he's claiming he's got an account, then just run it through the commission. That's why commissions are set up anyway. No fighter cares about how you wrap a hand. No fighter cares about what you weighed or your hydration policy or what your vision test is. None. They play along because the government does that. The fighters play along on that stuff like they care to get the one thing they do care about, which is the broker that holds the money. Oh, and by the way, guarantees it. If a promoter turns out he's only got $1 million and he owns 10, he would have put up through the commission a surety bond, and the commission will go against it, and that fighter will get his money, at least in theory. So that would be step number one. Hey, if you've really got it and it's in an account, put it in the bout agreement. What goes in the bout agreement versus an LOI with the company are two very separate instruments. And you would have to get a judge and a court to enforce one, but the commission, the government, will enforce the other. Do you see the difference? Okay, great. So the litmus test you want to find out, though, is what's next? Who are you going to have there? Who's in the front? Who do I, if I win, think I'm going to fight next? What match are you going to use this match to promote? A good promoter will make you, the audience, buy his commercial. A good promoter will turn tonight's event that you paid for into a commercial for his next event. So who's that going to be at this one? If they don't have that in place, you don't say anything. You just tuck that away. You tuck that away, which is this is a checkers player, which means he will cover the spread. He will pay me what he promised to pay me if the revenues come in that night, if he has it. If the revenues don't come in, if some kind of piracy happens or this fight flops for whatever reason, I'm not getting paid because the money isn't already there. But that's one of the ways that you'll know it. One of the ways you'll know it is this a long-term play? Do you have funding set aside for your play, which needs to be in this business at least 12 months? And before you just take him at his word or before you even ask him to see the bank statement, just find out who's going to be advertised and what date they're going to be advertised for and what venue do you have reserved on the night of my fight. It's just a really great test to know where a guy's at. It's a really great test to know if that promoter is on the come line. If he is prepared to rob Peter to pay Paul, and you don't always have to walk away in those situations. You just want to know. Like, people will tell you never want to go with a guy that will rob Peter to pay Paul, but the one person that doesn't care if you got to rob Peter to pay Paul is Paul. Paul's okay with that scenario. So different things you got to do, different feel-out process that needs to be done. But as far as George Masvidal going back to that fight with Nate Diaz, I think he was sincere. I think he doesn't agree with the outcome of that. And I will tell you, in George's defense, he never offered an excuse, and he never offered a potential injury, which would be an explanation for why he stood southpaw. And I'm very curious, and I've got to give George credit. No excuses. Shake hands, walk away.